Have you ever stepped into a room full of family, knowing you're already being judged? Not for what you've done, but for who you are? That's what happened to me and my son Micah at my mother's birthday brunch. A day meant for celebration turned into a battlefield of sharp words and sharper silences, until one quiet moment flipped the script entirely. My name is Arya, 37, a single mom living in a cramped two-bedroom apartment in South Seattle. Life is a grind. I work 2 jobs, waiting tables at a diner on Rainier Avenue where the coffee is weak but the tips keep us afloat, and running an online resale shop from my kitchen, selling thrifted clothes and vintage trinkets. It's not the life I dreamed. When I was young, sketching designs in my notebook, imagining a world where I could create freely. But dreams take a back seat when you're raising a kid alone, piecing together a life from mismatched parts, held together by grit and a stubborn hope that one day it'll feel lighter. Micah, my 11-year-old son, is the center of my world. He's not just a kid, he's a force, quick-witted, with a mind that sees the world in sharp lines and bold colors. He's always drawing, always creating. His sketchbook is his sanctuary, filled with superheroes, cityscapes, and stories that spill from his imagination. I've raised him to know his worth, to speak with intention, to stand tall even when the world tries to push him down. But at my mother's brunch, those lessons were put to the test in a way I never expected. My mother, Delilah, is a woman who lives for appearances. She grew up poor, scraping by in a small town, and when she married my father, a man with a steady job and a polished smile, she vowed never to look back. Her house is a museum of perfection, gleaming hardwood floors, crystal vases, a dining room table set with bone china and lavender napkins. To her, success is measured in how things look, not how they feel. Love, fulfillment, struggle, those are secondary to a well-curated image. I've never fit into her vision of success. I'm the daughter who got pregnant young, who left college, who ended up a single mom after a marriage that crumbled before Micah was 4. She's never let me forget it, her disappointment woven into every conversation, every glance. Then there's my cousin Marissa, the family's golden child. She's the kind of person who seems to glide through life. Her Instagram a parade of quinoa salads, family bike rides, and a golden retriever named Bentley. She married Cole, a consultant with a 6-figure salary, and their house looks like it was lifted from a magazine. Marissa's never worked a day job, but she'll lecture you on financial planning like she's a Wall Street expert. Her smiles are warm, but her eyes are cold, always scanning for a flaw to point out, always wrapped in a faux compliment. "It's so brave of you to keep working those service jobs," she told me last year, her tone dripping with pity. My mom nodded along, as if Marissa were dispensing wisdom from on high. When the invitation to my mother's birthday brunch arrived, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach. I didn't want to go. These gatherings were never about connection. They were about comparison, a stage for my mother and Marissa to remind me of everything I wasn't. But Micah insisted. "It's her birthday, Mom. You always say family's family." His heart is bigger than mine, and I couldn't say no. I told him to wear what made him feel good. He chose an old windbreaker, slightly oversized but loved, clean sneakers, and a faded cap that he said had character. I hesitated, knowing how my family would see it, but Micah's confidence was unshakable. "It's legit," he said, grinning. So we went, bracing ourselves for the inevitable. The house smelled of cinnamon candles and subtle disapproval. The dining room was a vision of excess, a long table draped in white linen, crystal glasses glinting under the chandelier, a spread of quiche, fruit tarts, and mimosas in flutes. Marissa was already there, in a champagne-colored dress, her laughter bright but hollow. My mom greeted us at the door, her kiss cold, her smile tight. "You could have dressed up a little," she muttered, her eyes flicking over Micah's outfit. I ignored it, guiding him to our usual spot, the floral couch by the window, close enough to be seen, far enough to be forgotten. Never at the main table, never part of the real conversation. The room buzzed with chatter about vacation homes in Aspen, private school waitlists, the cost of new Teslas. My Aunt Joyce was there, quiet as always, her presence a soft counterpoint to the smugness. I nodded when expected, smiled when required, my paper plate balanced on my knee. Micah sat quietly, tracing the hem of his sleeve, his eyes on the window. Then Marissa's voice cut through the hum, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is that jacket vintage or just really old?" Few chuckles followed, heads turning to Micah. He looked up calm, his fingers pausing. "It's mine," he said simply, his voice steady. Marissa leaned back, her surprise a performance. "It's very street. Like thrift store chic, you dunno." She laughed, expecting the room to join her. I glanced at my mom, hoping for a quick change of subject, a hint of defense. Instead, she smiled. A real smile, not the tight one she'd given us at the door. "He looks like a donation bin," she said, her tone light but cutting. The words landed like a slap, not just to Micah, but to me. The room froze. My fork stopped midair, my throat closing. Everyone laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was easy. That cruel, crawling laugh that makes your skin prickle, the kind that thrives on someone else's pain. And Micah heard every word. My face burned, my chest tight with a mix of shame and rage. I wanted to scoop him up, make an excuse, and leave to shield him from their venom, but he didn't move. His shoulders stayed squared, his eyes steady, blinking up at them with a grace I didn't have at his age, or even now. I sat there, silent, praying he didn't internalize their words, praying he knew how deeply wrong they were. The laughter wasn't just about his jacket or his shoes. It was about me, about the life I've fought to build, about every choice I've made that didn't fit their mold. And still, I said nothing, my voice trapped in the concrete of my fear. Then Micah turned his head, slow and deliberate, and looked at Marissa. "You want to see whose brand this is?" His voice was cool, unshaken, carrying a weight that silenced the room. Forks clinked onto plates. Marissa blinked, unsure if she was being challenged. My mom looked up, confused. Even I didn't know what he meant, not yet. But something in his tone made everyone pause, the mimosas forgotten, the pretense crumbling. Micah stood, reached for the zipper of his windbreaker, the one they'd mocked as donation bin, and began to pull it down. The air shifted, heavy with anticipation. Something was coming, and it wasn't what they expected. This wasn't just about a jacket. It was about how they saw us, me, the single mom who never measured up. Micah, the kid in thrift store. Clothes. They didn't see the late nights he spent sketching on our living room floor, the weeks he poured into his art, the email we opened together that made him leap 3 feet in the air. They saw a boy in an old jacket, but he was about to show them exactly who they were underestimating. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the room. All I could think was, "God, please don't let them break him." Micah stood in the center of the room, his small frame commanding a space that had always pushed us to the edges. He pulled the jacket open, revealing the inner lining. Black fabric, gold thread, a label that read, MB Studio X, Marcus Bellamy, Urban Creatives Grant. Limited issue, Dean Cron 03 of 10. The laughter died. Silence swallowed the room, louder than their cruelty had been. Marissa squinted, her perfect brows knitting together in confusion. My mom's fork hung midair, her mouth slightly open. Aunt Joyce leaned forward, her glasses slipping low on her nose. That label wasn't just a name, it was a story, one they didn't know but were about to learn. Let me back up. Micah isn't just any kid. He's a creator, a dreamer who turns blank pages into worlds that make sense when ours doesn't. Months ago, he heard about the Urban Creatives Grant, a national program for young artists. It was a long shot. Thousands of kids apply, only 10 are chosen. But Micah didn't hesitate. He spent weeks on his submission, a comic series called Southside Sentinel. It's about a skateboard-riding superhero who fights gentrification, bullies, and the kind of silence that lets cruelty fester. Every frame was hand-drawn, colored with cheap pencils from the dollar store, dialogue scratched out in black gel pen with no spell check. It was raw, real, and brilliant. Micah's heart poured onto the page. I watched him work night after night on our living room floor, surrounded by crumpled paper and pencil shavings. He'd ask me to read his dialogue, to tell him if it sounded heroic enough. I'd laugh, but my chest ached with pride. This was his world, his way of making sense of a life that hasn't always been kind. When he submitted it, he didn't expect to win. Neither did I. But then the email came, and I'll never forget the way his face lit up as he read, "Congratulations, Micah." He jumped 3 feet in the air, shouting, "Mom, I did it!" I cried in the kitchen, silent so he wouldn't see, while he read the letter again, just to be sure. The prize was more than recognition. It included mentorship, exposure, and a custom windbreaker from Marcus Bellamy, a streetwear legend whose designs blend art and activism. The jacket was one of 10 in the world, each stitched with the winner's name and number. When the package arrived, a simple black box with Micah's name in silver ink, I felt like I was holding his future. Inside was the windbreaker, a framed certificate and a letter from Bellamy himself. "Your voice is electric. Keep going." Micah begged me not to tell the family. "They won't get it," he said. And he was right, until that moment. At the brunch, when he made them see, Marissa broke the silence, her voice brittle. "Where'd you get that?" Micah looked her in the eye, unflinching. "They sent it to me when I won the Urban Creatives Grant. 10 kids in the country. It's not sold in stores." Then he turned to my mom, his gaze steady. "And just so you know, it's not thrift. It's limited edition." I couldn't breathe. He didn't yell or cry. He just stood there, correcting their narrative with a calm that cut deeper than anger ever could. The room was a vacuum. Their laughter replaced by the weight of their misjudgment. Marissa forced a laugh, trying to claw back her pride. "Well, I guess fashion's changing. You never know what's trendy these days." Micah's response was a blade, sharp and precise. "It's not supposed to look trendy. It's supposed to look like me." My mother set her fork down, her face unreadable. No apology, no laugh, just a look in her eyes like she was seeing Micah for the first time. Maybe she was. In our family, we were taught to stay small, to let the Marissas and Delilahs talk down without talking back. But Micah rewrote that rule. He didn't just stand up for himself. He stood up for me, for the life we've built, for every late night I spent scrubbing dishes or packing orders, for every moment I doubted myself. That jacket wasn't just fabric. It was proof that value isn't in a bank account, a big house, or a curated image. It's in the stories we tell and the courage to own them. It was a symbol of Micah's talent, his grit, his refusal to be reduced to their assumptions. The silence in the room wasn't just embarrassment. It was the sound of their world shifting, of their carefully constructed hierarchy crumbling under the weight of a child's truth. Aunt Joyce, who'd been quiet through the whole ordeal, reached over and touched Micah's shoulder. "That's impressive, honey. I mean it." Her voice was soft, but it carried. In a family like ours, where kindness is rare, it was a crack in the wall. Micah nodded, unfazed, and sat back down beside me. "Can we get cake now?" he asked, nudging me gently. I almost laughed, not at him, but at the sheer weight of what he'd done. He hadn't just changed the mood. He'd changed the room, the rules, the entire narrative we'd been forced to live under. That moment wasn't just about silencing their laughter. It was about exposing their smallness, their need to make us feel less to feel better about themselves. I looked at Marissa, her half-smile stuck like a mask, reaching for her mimosa like it could save her. My mom stared at her plate, her fork tracing circles through her untouched salad, her silence louder than her earlier words. For someone who always had something to say, her quiet was surreal. But in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need their apology. I wasn't waiting for them to understand us anymore. Micah had shown them what real value looked like. Not the kind you park in your driveway, but the kind that comes from knowing who you are, no matter who's watching. The rest of the brunch unfolded like a scene with the sound turned off. Marissa's usual chatter dulled to a murmur, her confidence deflated. My mom barely looked our way, her silence a stark contrast to her earlier laugh. The conversation tiptoed around us, careful not to stir the air Micah had shifted. I helped myself to a slice of lemon cake, its tartness sharp on my tongue, and watched as Micah pulled a folded sketch from his pocket to show Aunt Joyce. It was a page from Southside Sentinel, his superhero mid-kickflip, fighting off a faceless developer trying to bulldoze his neighborhood. Joyce leaned in, genuinely curious, asking about the character's powers, his story. Micah answered with a quiet pride, his voice steady as he explained the skateboard tricks and the themes of justice. It was a small moment, but in a house that had always felt like a battlefield, it felt like a ceasefire. As we ate, I thought about the years I'd spent in that house, shrinking under my mother's gaze, swallowing Marissa's backhanded compliments. I remembered the first time I brought Micah as a baby, how my mom had sighed at his mismatched onesie, how Marissa had offered to lend me baby clothes, as if I couldn't provide for my own son. Every visit was a reminder of my place, the daughter who didn't measure up, the mom who was always behind. But watching Micah now, calmly sharing his art with Joyce, I felt something shift. He wasn't just surviving their judgment, he was rewriting it. When it was time to leave, I stood taller, no apology in my posture, no guilt in my steps. I didn't thank anyone for the invitation, didn't linger for small talk. My mom called after us as we reached the door, her voice sharp. You didn't have to make a scene. I turned, calm as Micah had been. We didn't. You did. He just told the truth. The words felt like a release, like years of silence breaking free. We stepped outside, the crisp air washing over us, lighter than the heavy atmosphere of the house. Micah's hand slipped into mine, his grip firm, steady. No shame, no regret, just pride. In the car, I asked, "You okay?" He nodded, looking out the window. "Yeah, are you?" I laughed softly, a quiet breath of relief. "I think I actually am." As we drove through South Seattle, the city blurring past, neon signs, corner stores, the familiar rhythm of our world, I felt the weight of the day settle into something sacred. Micah hadn't just defended his jacket. He'd shown me what dignity looks like. Not shrinking to keep the peace, not bending to fit someone else's mold, but standing in your truth, letting it speak louder than any insult. At home, I made grilled cheese, the smell of melting butter filling our small kitchen. Micah sat at the table, his sketchbook open, his pencil flying across the page. The windbreaker hung by the door, its presence powerful, like a flag claiming our space. I sat beside him, watching the lines of his superhero take shape. "Hey," I said, "what you did back there, that was brave." He looked up, his eyes clear. "I just didn't like them talking like that about you or me." I nodded, my throat tight. "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for us. I'm proud of you." He smiled, small but real, and went back to drawing. But I couldn't go back to who I was before. That moment cracked something open in me, a fault line that had been building for years. I'd spent my life walking into my mother's house with my shoulders tucked, my head low, believing I had to earn their respect by changing who I was. I thought if I worked harder, made more money, looked more like Marissa, they'd stop seeing me as broken. But Micah showed me that respect isn't earned by fitting into their mold. It's claimed by standing in your truth, unapologetically. He didn't perform for them. He showed up as himself and made it clear. You don't have to like me, but you will see me. The next morning I woke early, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I opened my laptop and stared at the draft of my Etsy art shop, hand-drawn prints, greeting cards, designs inspired by Micah's comics and my own late-night doodles in my journal. I'd been tinkering with it for months, too scared to hit publish, afraid it wasn't real enough, afraid it wouldn't measure up to the polished lives of my family. But if Micah could stand in a room full of judgment and own his worth, what excuse did I have to stay quiet? I clicked publish, my heart racing as the page went live. It was small, but it was mine, a step toward claiming my own space, just as Micah had claimed his. I told him over breakfast, his spoon pausing in his cereal. I launched the shop, I said. He grinned. Cool. You gonna put Southside Sentinel on a shirt? I laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in years. Maybe. That act wasn't just about selling art. It was about refusing to stay small, about believing my work, my story, had value. Micah's moment had given me the courage to stop hiding, to stop waiting for permission to exist. Later that week, my mom texted, "I didn't mean to hurt you or Micah." The words stared back at me, simple but heavy. I sat with them for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Finally, I typed, "I believe you didn't mean to, but you still did." I hit send and set the phone down. She didn't respond, and that was okay. Some people only understand boundaries when you draw them in permanent ink. I wasn't waiting for her approval anymore. Wasn't holding my breath for an apology that might never come. Micah had shown me there's power in letting go of that need. That windbreaker became more than fabric. It was a symbol of grit, creativity, and identity. Every time Micah wears it, I'm transported back to that day, not with shame, but with strength. He didn't scream or cry or argue. He unzipped a jacket and let the truth speak louder than their laughter. That's the lesson he taught me. You don't have to fight to prove your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding. Sometimes you just stand still, say your truth, and let the silence do the rest. Looking back, I see now that I'd spent years trying to protect Micah by shielding him, thinking I had to absorb the world's blows so he wouldn't have to. But he was already learning to protect himself, not with anger, but with identity. At 11, he's rewriting the rules of a family that tried to keep us small, showing me what it means to claim your space without apology. I'm not just raising a son, I'm raising a force, and I'm learning from him every day. That brunch wasn't the first time I felt small in that house, and it probably won't be the last. But it was the first time I realized I don't have to keep showing up to places that shrink me. I don't owe anyone access to my life just because we share blood. Micah's moment was about more than a jacket. It was about owning your story, refusing to let anyone else write it for you. It was quiet, deliberate, and unshakable, a kind of courage that doesn't need to shout to be heard. My life hasn't changed overnight. I still work 2 jobs, still live in that small apartment, still feel the weight of bills and long nights. But something inside me has shifted. I'm not chasing my family's approval anymore. I'm building something with Micah, brick by brick, even if the bricks are mismatched and chipped. Those bricks, our art, our grit, our truth, are stronger than any polished facade. The Etsy shop is growing slowly with a few orders trickling in. I'm sketching again, not just for myself, but for the world, inspired by Micah's fearless creativity. We're planning a Southside Sentinel shirt, his superhero's face bold across the chest. It's a small dream, but it's ours. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the times you've been underestimated or found the courage to stand up, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and hit that like button. If you want more real, raw stories like this, stories of grit, truth, and quiet triumphs, subscribe to the channel. We're building something here, a space for the kind of courage that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Join us.